We've been taught to hide our struggles like they're stains instead of scars. Like if someone sees the bruise, they'll question the strength. Like if someone hears the doubt, they'll doubt us too. So we edit, we filter, we present the polished version. And over time, we start confusing that polished version with who we actually are. But here's the quiet tragedy no one talks about. The more you protect yourself from being rejected, the more you prevent yourself from being fully loved. Because love cannot attach to what isn't real. It attaches to truth. It attaches to presence. It attaches to the trembling voice that says, I'm scared you'll leave when you see this part of me. You know what I've realized? Shame thrives in silence. It feeds on isolation. It grows in locked rooms. But the moment you speak it out loud, the moment someone hears it and doesn't run, it loses its power. That's why confession feels terrifying. Because shame convinces us exposure equals loss. But sometimes exposure equals freedom. I've been asking myself lately, what am I actually afraid of? Not losing you. Not really. I'm afraid of being measured and found lacking. Afraid that if you look closely enough, you'll see the inconsistencies, the insecurity behind the confidence, the fear behind the independence, the longing behind the calm. I built a personality around self-sufficiency, around competence, around being the steady one. Because if I was steady, no one would question me. If I was strong, no one would leave me. But strength without vulnerability is distance. It keeps admiration alive, but it kills intimacy. And I don't want admiration. I want closeness. I don't want to be impressive. I want to be known. There's a difference. Have you ever felt that strange loneliness inside a relationship? Not because the other person is absent, but because you are. Because parts of you never showed up, because you're sitting next to someone who loves you, but they're loving the edited version. That loneliness is subtle. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It says, if they knew everything, would they still choose me? And that question becomes a background hum in everything, in every argument, in every quiet moment, in every pause in conversation. It changes the way you show up. You become strategic instead of sincere. You calculate instead of connect. And slowly, without realizing it, you start performing love instead of living it. That's what I've been doing. Not lying, not deceiving, just withholding. And withholding is quiet. It doesn't look like betrayal. It looks like control. But control is the enemy of intimacy, because intimacy requires surrender, not surrender of dignity, not surrender of boundaries, surrender of the illusion that you can manage someone's perception of you forever. You can't. Eventually, the truth surfaces, either by confession or by exhaustion. I reached exhaustion. I got tired of being the composed one, the emotionally measured one, the one who always knew what to say, because sometimes I don't know what to say. Sometimes I'm overwhelmed. Sometimes I question whether I deserve something this good, and that's the part I've hidden. Not a secret event, not a dramatic mistake, just doubt. Doubt about myself. Doubt about whether I can sustain this, whether I can show up consistently, whether I can love without retreating when it gets too real. You deserve honesty about that, because intimacy isn't built on certainty. It's built on truth. And the truth is, I'm still learning. Still unlearning old defense mechanisms. Still dismantling the instinct to emotionally withdraw when things feel intense. Still teaching myself that closeness doesn't equal danger, because at some point in my life, it did. Closeness meant vulnerability. Vulnerability meant exposure. Exposure meant pain. So I adapted. I became capable. I became composed. I became the person who could survive alone. But surviving alone isn't the same as loving fully. And if I keep choosing survival patterns in a relationship that asks for openness, I will sabotage the very thing I claim to want. That realization hit me hard, because it forced me to confront something uncomfortable. It's easier to be alone than to be seen. Being alone is controlled. Being seen is unpredictable. When you're alone, rejection isn't possible. When you're seen, everything is possible. Loss, acceptance, deep connection, deep hurt. And I've been afraid of that spectrum. Afraid that once you see the cracks, you'll realize I'm not as emotionally solid as I appear. But maybe emotional solidity isn't the goal. Maybe emotional honesty is. Maybe strength isn't never doubting. Maybe strength is saying, I doubt myself sometimes, and I'm still here. I've been reflecting on how relationships deepen. It's not through grand gestures, not through perfection. It's through moments like this. Moments where one person risks discomfort for authenticity, and the other person responds not with solutions, but with presence. That's what I'm hoping for. Not reassurance that I'm flawless, not promises that you'll never leave. Just presence. Just, I see you. Because being seen doesn't erase fear, but it softens it. And I'm tired of carrying fear alone. I'm tired of thinking I have to resolve every insecurity before I bring it to you. Growth isn't linear. Healing isn't finished. And love isn't a reward for self-perfection. It's a partnership in evolution. The irony is, the parts of me I've hidden are the parts that most need connection. The insecure part doesn't need isolation. It needs reassurance. The doubtful part doesn't need silence. It needs conversation. The fearful part doesn't need walls. It needs patience. And by hiding those parts, I've been starving them of the very thing that would help them grow. You. That's the paradox. We hide what needs love the most. We conceal what requires acceptance. And then we wonder why we feel alone. I don't want to feel alone with you. I don't want to sit across from you carrying thoughts you never get to hear. I don't want to default to humor when things get too vulnerable. I don't want to deflect when the conversation moves towards something real. I want to stay, even when my voice shakes, even when my certainty fades, even when I'm unsure how my truth will land. Because real intimacy isn't built in the absence of fear. It's built in the presence of it. It's built when someone says, I'm scared, and the other person says, stay. I don't know what your response will be, and that's the risk, but I've realized something powerful. The outcome matters less than the alignment. Even if this shifts things. Even if this forces difficult conversations. Even if this exposes incompatibilities. At least it will be honest. And honesty is the only foundation that can sustain something long-term. I don't want a connection that survives because I was careful. I want one that survives because we were real. I want to look back years from now and know we built this on truth. Not performance. Not strategy. Not curated vulnerability. Truth. And truth is messy. It includes insecurity. It includes contradiction. It includes growth and progress. That's what I'm offering you. Not a finished product, not a perfected partner, a person, a human, still learning, still healing, still sometimes afraid, but willing. Willing to show up without armor. Willing to let you see the parts I once believed were too much. Willing to trust that love can hold imperfection. Because I've come to understand something fundamental. Being almost known is more painful than being rejected. Living half exposed creates a slow ache, a subtle emptiness. But full honesty, even when it risks loss, creates integrity. And integrity feels like peace. So if there's trembling in my voice right now, if there's uncertainty in my eyes, it's not because I don't care. It's because I care enough to stop hiding. I'm choosing connection over control, truth over protection, presence over performance. And whatever happens next, at least I will know I loved you from the open, not from behind walls, not from behind strategy, from the most honest version of myself I can offer today. And that, for the first time in a long time, feels like freedom. There's a version of me you've known, and then there's a version of me I've kept just slightly out of reach. Not because I wanted to deceive you, not because I was hiding some dramatic secret, but because I was afraid that if you saw everything, the unfinished parts, the insecure parts, the parts still learning how to love, something would shift. Maybe not loudly, maybe not immediately, but subtly, permanently. You ever carry something for so long that it becomes part of your posture? That's what this has been like. A quiet tension in my chest, a carefulness in my words, a hesitation when conversations drift too close to something real. You asked me once why I sometimes go quiet when things feel intense, why I deflect with humor when you get too close to something emotional. I told you I didn't know. That wasn't true. I knew. I just didn't want to admit it. Because admitting it meant acknowledging that vulnerability still scares me. And that's hard to say out loud when you want to be seen as strong. I've always thought strength meant being self-contained, handling my emotions privately, processing my fears alone, solving my own storms before letting anyone see the rain. I convinced myself that independence was maturity, that needing less made me more valuable, that if I could carry everything alone, I'd never burden anyone. But here's what I've learned recently. Carrying everything alone doesn't make you strong. It makes you distant. And distance is quiet. It doesn't look like conflict. It doesn't sound like shouting. It looks like smiling while editing your truth. It looks like saying, I'm fine, when what you mean is, I'm overwhelmed, but I don't know how to let you see that. It looks like loving someone deeply, but never fully relaxing into the safety of being known. And that's where I've been, close to you, but not completely exposed, sharing stories, but not always the meaning behind them, laughing with you, but sometimes protecting the deeper layers. I've been standing at the threshold of intimacy, close enough to feel it, but still holding the door halfway closed. And I've realized something painful. Withholding doesn't protect connection. It weakens it. Not immediately, not dramatically, but slowly. Because intimacy isn't built on how well we perform compatibility. It's built on how honestly we reveal ourselves. And I've been performing parts of myself I thought you needed. The confident one, the composed one, the emotionally steady one. But I'm not always steady. Sometimes I wake up uncertain. Sometimes I question if I'm enough. Sometimes I wonder if I'll sabotage something good because I don't fully believe I deserve it. And I've been afraid to let you see that. Afraid you'd interpret my doubts as instability. Afraid you'd mistake my fears for weakness. Afraid that if you saw how much I still wrestle internally, you'd reconsider choosing me. But here's the truth I can't avoid anymore. If I only let you love the polished version of me, then you're not actually loving me. You're loving a carefully curated character. And that realization hurts more than rejection ever could, because what's lonelier than being loved for someone you're pretending to be? I don't want to be admired. I want to be understood. I don't want to be impressive. I want to be real. Have you ever noticed how we test people in relationships? We reveal ourselves in layers. Small truths first, safe vulnerabilities. We say things that sound honest but don't truly cost us anything. We watch how they respond. And if they don't flinch, we go a little deeper. I've been doing that. Not consciously, not maliciously, just cautiously. I've been measuring how much truth the relationship can hold. But that measuring, that constant internal calculation, creates distance. Because love shouldn't feel like a psychological experiment. It shouldn't feel like I'm constantly asking, is it safe yet? Safety doesn't come from testing. It comes from trusting. And trust requires risk. That's the part I've been avoiding. Risk. The risk of being fully seen. The risk of saying, I don't always feel secure. The risk of admitting that sometimes I fear abandonment even when there's no evidence of it. The risk of confessing that I'm still healing from parts of my past that taught me closeness can disappear without warning. It's easier to appear composed than to admit that intimacy sometimes triggers old wounds. It's easier to say nothing than to say, when you pull away even slightly, my mind tells stories. And I don't want to keep pretending that my inner world is simpler than it is, because it's not. It's layered. It's complicated. It's human. And I want to be human with you. Not strategic. Not curated. Human. I've spent years mastering self-reliance, but self-reliance has a shadow. It makes you hesitant to need anyone. It makes you uncomfortable asking for reassurance. It makes you withdraw when what you actually crave is closeness. I didn't realize how much that pattern was shaping us. Every time things got deeper, I'd subtly pull back. Not dramatically. Just enough. Enough to regain emotional control. Enough to avoid feeling too exposed. But that control comes at a cost. Because intimacy grows in openness, not control. I've been protecting myself from potential pain. But in doing that, I've also been protecting myself from potential depth. And depth is what I want. Not surface compatibility. Not just shared routines. Depth. The kind where silence doesn't feel threatening. Where tears don't feel embarrassing. Where fear can be spoken without immediately being fixed. I want to tell you something honestly. I'm afraid of losing you. Not because you've given me a reason, but because loving you means I care enough for loss to hurt. And that realization makes me vulnerable. When I didn't care, I wasn't afraid. Now that I care, I am. And instead of saying that directly, I've sometimes masked it as independence. I've pretended I need less than I do. But the truth, I need reassurance sometimes. I need patience sometimes. I need to hear that you're here, not because I doubt you, but because my old survival instincts still whisper. And I'm learning that asking for reassurance isn't weakness. It's communication. It's participation in intimacy. We're taught that confident people don't need reassurance, but emotionally healthy people do. Because reassurance isn't about insecurity. It's about connection. And connection requires expression. I don't want to wait until fear turns into distance. I don't want to let pride build walls where conversation could build bridges. I don't want to keep carrying the internal narrative alone, because when I carry it alone, it grows. It becomes distorted. It becomes louder than reality. And the only antidote to distorted fear is shared truth. So here it is. Sometimes I feel unsure if I'm enough for what we're building. Sometimes I fear that my emotional complexity will feel heavy. Sometimes I worry that my healing process is slower than it should be. Sometimes I compare myself to the version of me I think you deserve, and I come up short. But those thoughts don't define me. They just visit me. And instead of hiding them, I want to talk about them. Because intimacy isn't the absence of doubt. It's the willingness to reveal it. I don't expect you to fix my fears. I don't need you to erase them. I just need to know that when I voice them, they don't scare you away. That when I say, I'm struggling with this. You don't silently downgrade me. That when I admit imperfection, you don't reinterpret my worth. Because that's the real fear. Not that I'm flawed, but that my flaws will cost me love. And maybe that belief was built long before you. Maybe it was shaped by experiences where vulnerability wasn't received gently. Maybe it was reinforced in moments where emotional honesty led to withdrawal instead of closeness. But you are not my past, and I don't want to treat you like you are. That's why I'm choosing this. Choosing honesty before resentment. Choosing transparency before distance. Choosing vulnerability before performance. Because performance is exhausting, and I'm tired. Tired of editing myself. Tired of pretending that uncertainty doesn't exist. Tired of acting like strength means silence. Real strength is saying, "This is hard for me." Real strength is admitting, "I don't always have it together." Real strength is trusting someone enough to reveal your unfinished parts. So this is me revealing them. Not dramatically, not desperately, just honestly. I am still learning how to trust without bracing. Still learning how to love without preparing for loss. Still learning how to stay emotionally present when fear shows up. But I am trying. And more importantly, I am willing. Willing to stay in conversations that scare me. Willing to sit in discomfort instead of retreating. Willing to let you see the full spectrum of who I am. Because I've realized something important. If this relationship is going to deepen, it cannot be built on half-truths. Not lies, half-truths. The truths I almost say, the feelings I almost reveal, the fears I almost admit. Almost is where intimacy dies slowly, and I don't want almost. I want real. Even if real is messy, even if real is uncertain, even if real requires courage every single time. I don't know exactly how this will land. I don't know if it makes things heavier or clearer. But I do know this. I would rather risk discomfort than continue living partially known. Because being partially known creates a subtle loneliness that no amount of affection can fix. And I don't want to feel lonely next to you. I want to feel seen, fully. Not just when I'm confident, not just when I'm strong, not just when I'm impressive, but when I'm unsure, when I'm emotional, when I'm working through something in real time. That's intimacy, not perfection. Presence. And I am choosing presence, right now, with you. No more half-open doors. No more strategic vulnerability. No more protecting a version of myself I think you need. Just me. Learning. Healing. Still afraid sometimes. But choosing connection anyway. Because love isn't built on flawless people. It's built on honest ones. And I want us to be honest. Even when it trembles. Even when it risks. Even when it feels exposed. Because I don't want a love that survives because I was careful. I want a love that deepens because I was real. And this is me being real. There's a part of me that always waits before speaking. Not because I don't have anything to say, but because I'm measuring the risk of saying it. I've mastered that pause. That second where I decide whether the truth is safe enough to release. Most of the time, I choose the edited version. The softer version. The less complicated version. The one that keeps the peace and protects my image. But lately I've been wondering what that protection is really costing me. Because every time I swallow a fear, every time I laugh off something that actually hurt, every time I say, "It's fine," when it isn't, I feel a small distance grow between us. Not a dramatic one, just a subtle shift. And subtle shifts, repeated often enough, turn into walls. I don't want walls with you. The truth is, I've always been afraid that if someone sees all of me, not just the confident parts, not just the capable parts, but the insecure, questioning, Still healing parts, they'll decide I'm too much or not enough, too emotional, too complicated, too uncertain, or maybe just not worth the effort. So I learned how to be easy. Easy to love, easy to understand, easy to admire. But easy isn't the same as real. Real is messier. Real says, sometimes I overthink. Real says, sometimes I need reassurance even when I act like I don't. Real says, I'm scared of losing something good, so I pretend I don't need it. And pretending not to need you doesn't make me strong. It makes me distant. I don't want to be distant anymore. I don't want to sit beside you carrying thoughts you never get to hear. I don't want to filter my fears so carefully that you only ever meet the polished version of me. Because if you only love the polished version, then you're not really loving me. You're loving who I perform as. And performance is exhausting. Vulnerability terrifies me because it feels like stepping into open air without knowing if someone will catch you. There's no guarantee, no contract, just exposure. But I'm starting to understand something: connection without exposure is just proximity. You can be close to someone and still feel alone. You can share space, share time, even share affection, and still hide the one truth that would make you feel fully seen. I don't want to hide anymore. Not because I'm suddenly fearless. I'm not. I'm still afraid that if I admit my doubts, you'll see me differently. Still afraid that if I tell you how deeply I care, you'll realize how much power that gives you to hurt me. But I'm more afraid of something else now. I'm afraid of being almost known forever, of building something that looks strong on the outside, but feels slightly hollow underneath, because I never let you see the full picture. So here it is. I don't always feel secure. I don't always feel certain. I don't always know if I'm doing this right. But I care enough to risk telling you that. Because real intimacy isn't built on confidence alone. It's built on honesty. And honesty means letting you see the cracks and trusting that you won't run from them. This is me choosing to be seen instead of just admired, to be known instead of just liked, to be real instead of safe, and whatever happens next, at least it will be built on truth, not on the version of me that was too afraid to speak.